Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and on this episode of King of the Hill, I'll be taking a look at the minions of the Knights of the Round Table. The Knights have a vigilante-like structure, but King Arthur is slightly elevated to be the faction leader, at least in terms of printed power. He has both extra power and an incentive to wield Excalibur. Is that an appropriate title? Is King Arthur truly the king minion? If I were to rank the minions, from my least favorite to favorite, because that's how ranking works, Sonus, would King Arthur be at the top? Let's find out. To evaluate the knight minions, you have to consider them from both a base breaking and quest completion perspective. The knights only have 5 bonus VP from 4 cards, 3 of which are traditional quests. For a quest to complete, you need the quest itself, the ability to move, and the quest criteria. From a base breaking perspective, it's about power and flexibility. We'll see how they align. My least favorite knight minion is Gawain, the mini Starlight, who can gain power for each other of your minions of power 4 here. Gawain's ability is nice, but it looks stronger on paper than I found it to be in reality, because I tend to use it as a big drop finisher. It doesn't really strike me as a card I play in advance and then move for swarming, and his ceiling has been pretty low. He's typically a 6, maybe a 7 if I really try. And here's why. Gawain's ability requires other minions of power 4. That means if Gawain is a 7, there is 12 other power on that base for a total of 19. But if there's 12 power there, how did that happen? To me, the ability to make that happen is better than Gawain's actual ability, because you cannot spread out and swarm later. The power creep is extensive. Another factor that hurts Gawain is that there is no tangible reason to play him early, whereas everyone else has one. He's the least flexible in terms of what he can do, which is why Gawain is my least favorite as a one-trick pony, which is ironic given his ability. My number 6 is Lancelot. Lancelot's job is to gain power, and he can do so quickly, but does nothing in isolation. While power is ultimately best for breaking bases, it's also power creep. His ability is also one that, like Gawain's, can be exploited if you pull him terminally because it triggers regardless of who moves him. Lancelot excels at completing the Green Knight, but that's about it. He doesn't help you get the Green Knight and cannot move himself, being completely reliant on specific cards. Lancelot's best value comes from his ability to grow multiple times per turn, but without other cards, he just feels lacking. But unlike Gawain, he has potential for singly powerful minion strategies and more naturally combines with the other cards, putting him slightly ahead of his fellow knight. Number 5 on my list is Guinevere. Evaluating some of these minions is really tough because I almost always value a pull rather than a push, and Guinevere is a push. Guinevere works best on bases with on-play reactions like a fairy circle, so that you can exploit the base ability then move off. Otherwise, I like Guinevere for the ping-pong effect, moving someone immediately back after they move there. For example, this works really well with the questing beast gaining multiple counters. The issue with Guinevere is that she has a less valuable move with no means of setting it up. She does, however, have a secondary ability to protect your base modifiers, but I have to say this ability feels unnecessary. Base modifier destruction is rarely prevalent. Normally if they have it, you can destroy 1, maybe 2. It's rare that cards have more than that, and I wouldn't exactly consider grannies to be threatening King Arthur. This feels like an attempt to counter a counter when too much focus is put on counterplay and specifically trying to hurt them in testing. But the first ability is also restrictive enough that it merits a second ability, I just don't know what it is. Number 4, right in the middle, is actually King Arthur. King Arthur to me is a 6 power drop that facilitates a movement. It's a very good big drop card, but that's it. To me, King Arthur may as well have been an on-play ability rather than a talent. For King Arthur to be any form of engine, you need the ability to move off after you move on. And for all that effort, you just get a counter, and there are easier ways, especially since you need a modifier for the counter. Not that it's hard, but still. Probably the simplest way to generate a counter is to have King Arthur pull Guinevere who pushes him off. But that's a 2-card combo for 1 power per turn. One that's very telegraphed as well. I value King Arthur for his ability to break a base and complete a quest at the same time, like pulling Lancelot to the Green Knight. If you actually did have the ability to move off, that would be the better ability, which surprisingly leads into number 3, Percival. Now looking at these 2 cards in complete isolation, King Arthur has a better ability. So why is Percival higher? Because of faction context. With a faction like Knights, having more movement is good. Moving multiple times is good. Having Noble Steed doesn't make Percival worse, it makes him better. It means that you can trigger things and move off, keeping engines in play. It means quickly drawing cards and gaining power counters, while also defensively moving to avoid your target. Percival doesn't provide value in a vacuum, but he's pretty close, and you have 6 base modifiers. and his flexibility is really important to me. If you just need to spread out, he can do that. If you need the abilities of your engine modifiers, he can trigger them. He can do both at the same time. I've always been a fan of Captain Ahab, and he's the 4-power version, which is certainly serviceable. The remaining 2 minions have the ability to provide turn 1 value, so who gets the top spot? It's not Galahad, but he's pretty close. Searching is always very strong, and Galahad provides the means to get you access to whatever base modifier you want. With synergy you can draw at that turn, but even without, it's still extremely valuable. And yet he has a secondary ability. Unlike Guinevere, this feels extremely relevant. Galahad has the ability to move a modifier, curiously before the base scores, because that feels like a nerf as opposed to after. With the knight modifiers, none of them really seem to matter whether it moves before or after scoring. This hurts power-granting modifiers, which seemingly exists just to limit the potential with other base modifier factions, or an attempt to avoid instead of the discard pile by clearly moving it first. Regardless, with the knight actions, the ability is a fallback plan, but with other factions it's a strategy driver. Moving a card like Overgrowth again? Definitely powerful. Preserving Rotary Slug Thrower in an overpayment? Wonderful. Moving Been and Gone every base score to keep Galahad in play? This is another way of creating an infinite base scoring without relying on an initially vulnerable first mate. In fact, Galahad can search for Been and Gone, setting himself up for later. As more base modifiers of this type get introduced, Galahad is one of the minions who will remain the most relevant, but he unfortunately loses the top spot to Merlin. Like Galahad, Merlin can provide first turn value, but with a little luck, Merlin can be extremely impactful. You can potentially draw or play extra actions each turn, and the knights have extra actions which increase Merlin's success rate. This extra action, especially when combined with Galahad, can set up some instant grail plays that are extremely hard to defend against. Merlin's ability is drastically different from everyone else, but that ends up being a good thing. What makes Merlin so good is not just the high rate at which his talent will draw an action, but play it. Base modifiers are extremely easy to play, with the Grail being the one exception, but you always have the fallback of drawing it. But their minion modifiers are also easy to play and greatly speed up their game plan. That just leaves standard actions, which ordinarily might be held for later, especially if they granted power, but none of these do. In fact, these two are a great example of chance-type cards that could be played with an extra action, especially Lady of the Lake. The only thing that hurts Merlin is that Mist of Avalon decreases his chances of success, but that's a small price for his tremendous upside. Thematically, I always envisioned King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table as first among equals, with Merlin being the all-powerful wizard, and I think this faction comes pretty close to mimicking that. King Arthur himself is a middle-of-the-pack minion who does one job well, while Merlin is the headliner. I always enjoy unique minions where finding the right minion matters, and the knights have a decent spread. How would you rank the knight minions? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.